I'll just do a few housekeeping points. We ask that everyone be respectful of the presenters and the other participants this evening. We're all working towards a better maple industry, and the more we can work together, the further we're going to get with that. There will be time for discussion, as Randall mentioned, but please try and keep your comments short. It's easy to go down the rabbit hole on some of these items. Not that we don't want discussion, and we'll certainly let things roll on if there's time, but we also have to be mindful that it would be great if everyone that wants to can make a comment. We'd also really encourage people to write some comments down and send them in to us. That's very helpful. You can use the chat for questions throughout the presentation tonight and during the discussion time. We do record that, and so those comments do show up. For those of you that aren't familiar with Zoom, if you're looking at your screen down in the lower right-hand corner, there's 3 little dots and it says more right next to the end button. If you click there, it'll say chat. And when you click on that, a box should come up and you should be able to see the questions that everyone posed. Also, there's another way you can get our attention. If you'd like to comment, you can raise your hand, and there's another menu item down there. It's called reactions, and you just click there, and then there's a little bar that says raise your hand, and it'll look like what I just did there. And then you can lower it again when you're finished. So and then, of course, when we're in discussion, if you're having trouble with any of that, please feel free to unmute and speak, find a gap. But during the presentation, we would ask that you keep your microphone muted as much as you can, just so we don't get a lot of background noise coming in. And with that, I'll share my screen so you can see the presentation tonight. Just give me 1 second here because I'm having a little trouble with my own. Can't see the chat because I've got to have another window open. So I just have to see if I can get that showing. Okay, there we go. All set. How's that look, Randall?
It looks fine if we start on the front page.
Oh, is that not? There we go.
There we go.
Through, I guess.
Yeah, and Bob's going to kick off this relay race.
Okay, away we go.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming on to our second presentation. Tonight, we're going to go through the strategic plan, the draft strategic plan with governance and government and industrial relations. John, you can go to the second slide. So to help focus the limited resources on the activities that deliver the most value to Ontario maple producers, every 5 years, OMSPA conducts a detailed strategic review. This review evaluates progress against the previous established goals, examines how the Ontario maple products market is evolving and what this means for producers, and develops a deeper understanding of the needs and wants of OMSPA members. The outcome is a 5-year strategic plan that establishes the strategic priorities for the organization and lays out the roadmap for achieving these priorities. John?
That's yours too, but I can do it, not a problem. The early on in our process, which was almost started a year ago, I guess, and it carried on throughout the early months of 2022, we had commissioned 10 working groups, and there were anywhere from 4 to 12 people on each working group. And some of the working groups, of course, are underpinning information, and other ones look very deeply at a very specific piece of a very specific subject area and much more detail. So those are the ones that are listed on the side. These are the working groups. And the ones that informed what we're talking about this evening were, of course, the whole area of financial sustainability and effectiveness of OMSPA, the jurisdictional scan, which means the what is happening in other places in the world that have maple production, and what is happening in other agricultural organizations in Ontario. So there were over 100 members and other select outside experts that brought their expertise to bear. And this draft strategic plan was developed directly from these outputs from these working groups. There was nothing created that wasn't brought up in a working group. So we want to thank those folks again. Those 1 in 6 of our members participated in that, and they put many hours in over an extended period of time, over a month or 2 or even 3 in some cases, some even for 6 months, as they really got deep into the meat of what was going on. So carry on, John, please. Next slide. Thank you. I believe this one's yours, sir.
Yep.
Bob?
And so OMSPA is a member-led agricultural producers association in the province of Ontario, directly serving the needs of maple syrup producers across the province. 2 statements in the strategic plan that help direct the association's activities and initiatives are the vision and mission statements. The vision statement is just that, a future vision of the maple products industry in Ontario. The mission statement is a statement of how OMSPA, as an association of members, will achieve that vision. The vision statement reads, OMSPA envisions a robust and growing maple products industry in Ontario that embraces the highest standards of quality assurance and professionalism to provide exceptional maple products to Ontario, Canadian, and international markets under a brand that is synonymous with the highest quality. The growing Ontario industry embraces all producers from the hobbyist to the largest commercial operations, as well as the other links in the maple products value chain, bottlers, equipment manufacturers, and other food industry players and researchers, building on the honor and rich tradition of maple syrup production in Ontario. The mission statement reads, the Ontario Maple Syrup Producers Association provides leadership and stewardship of Ontario maple products production, working on behalf of producers and the maple products value chain to support and drive adoption of best practices through ongoing education and training to increase the value of the market for Ontario maple syrup through marketing and promotional activities, and to work through government advocacy towards a policy climate that aligns with the needs of producers in the entire maple products value chain. Next.
Yeah, so in this particular slide we had 10 working groups, and then by the time we worked it all through and thought, well, some things support other things, and how we're going to line it up with the way we have formed in the past, anyways, our committees of the board, we decided that there were probably 6 pillars, and that's probably the best way to explain it. Let's look at the top of the slide. I don't mean the title of it, but the ultimate outcome is that we are doing what we do as an association to increase the economic value for Ontario maple syrup producers. And so last evening, we looked at pillar 1, which was the services to members. so that members deem those services to be valuable. And our immediate outcome is we want to optimize them, and we explored how we might want to do that, and it's in consultation, of course, as time goes on about what members deem as valuable. So last evening, we also talked about pillar 3. So this evening, of course, the 2 pillars, pillar 2 and pillar 3, was so we can optimize the pricing, setting conditions to differentiate our product to achieve higher pricing for Ontario-based maple syrup. And those 2 pillars will be, one was reviewed last evening, was applied research and training, and we will look at quality assurance tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening, we'll also look at pillar 4, which is about driving the demand increase for maple products that are from Ontario, that originate in Ontario, and that's related to marketing and branding. And Leanne Thompson, who's responsible for marketing and promotions in OMSPA, as we currently are structured, she'll be exploring that with us. So tonight we were at the sister pillars of governance, and government and industry relations will be undertaken. And so we will talk more about how we want to, under governance, optimize and rationalize OMSPA structure for maximum impact and efficiency following organizational best practices. And as well, we're going to have some legislative requirements placed upon us, and Bob will talk more about those. Those are things that are imposed upon us that we have to live up to, or change the way in which we're doing things. Pillar 6 is the one that I'm responsible for. It's as the chair of government and industry relations, and it's really to establish that capacity inside of OMSPA, and mostly it is to make sure that the regulations we need are there, that the regulations that would cause us problems, we find ways in which to work with the government to find a way to make things happen so that we aren't unduly disadvantaged. And a big portion of that work will be securing funding for the priorities that our organization needs funding for under any of these pillars. So there we are, and we can then look at, and we will look at, the more specific things that are related to the pillar 5, governance, and pillar 6, government and industry relations.
So as Randall's laid out, there are 6 pillars, and they all support the ultimate goal, which is to increase the economic value for Ontario maple syrup producers. Randall's our option tonight. We're looking at governance and government and industrial relations. As you go through the strategic plan, you'll see that it starts with an ultimate goal, and then an intermediate goal, and then an immediate goal. And then we move into major areas of undertaking, and below that we have activities, which we will get into as the slides move through tonight. It's interesting. What we should note is that the strategic goal for governance is to optimize and rationalize OMSPA's structure for maximum impact and efficiency following organizational best practices, and that for government and industrial relations, it is to expand and entrench government and industrial relations capacity, develop strong internal competencies in securing government funding for industry priorities. And as we go through the next slides, we will talk about why these goals are important to the success of OMSPA, and for OMSPA to attain the ultimate goal. John?
Remember I said originally that some of the working groups were sort of underpinners, and they were sort of collecting information that we can compare ourselves to. And so we said, how do we compare to other agricultural organizations And we looked at a wide number of them, but the one that was probably the closest to us is the Ontario Beekeepers Association. There's some lessons to be learned how they did what they did, and who they're working with to do that. And what's important to notice out of that is that the Ontario Beekeepers Association is roughly the same size as the Maple Syrup Producers Association. Well, interesting, we're the same size from an economic impact perspective, but we have a 0.5 of a full-time employee, whereas the Ontario Beekeepers Association has 7 full-time employees. 2 of them are working sort of in the core operations of the organization, and the other 5 are working in that research and technology transfer, what used to be called in government circles, and any of us who remember OMAFRA or any of their predecessors, it was names, because the name changed over time, is that was what the extension people used to do, and that's not what's happening currently. So anyways, that's so one of the ones we look to is Ontario Beekeepers Association. I'll talk a bit more about that later when we talk about some upcoming activities. And what is interesting to note is that the Beekeepers Association, because they get significant grants, their membership fees that they collect from their members equals only 19%. So only 1 out of every $5 they have in their budget actually comes from the members. The other 80%, or 4 out of $5, comes from the strategic grants and initiatives with government. In many cases, that's for them to deliver things that the government used to deliver. And we are significantly under resourced as it's compared, like from a staff perspective, when it's compared to other Ontario agricultural organizations. What's the right level? To be determined, but we do have some comparables at the moment. Next slide, please. We also did a study and looked at the various maple syrup producers organizations across North America. The ones that are most like us are Vermont and New York. Interestingly, they also have significant amounts of staff above and beyond what we do. In addition to, they have extension departments in Vermont and New York, meaning university related extension people. That's how they work in the States. It's not necessarily the government, it's the money given to universities to do the extension work. And they have significant research and extension people who work quasi like staff, and it's very closely related to what the objectives of the organization are. So it's hand in glove, and in some cases they serve on the board of, in Vermont's case, serve right up directly on the board of the Vermont Maple Syrup Producers Association. Let's roll on to the other one. So we do have some comparables, and we know what they do, and we were pretty impressed by what they do, but it does take people. Next slide, please.
So the Financial Sustainability and Effectiveness Working Group dove deeper into the comparison with other maple syrup producers in North America, specifically New Brunswick, Vermont, and New York. Quebec was not considered directly in this comparison due to its legislative environment. This comparison is graphically represented here, and it showed that OMSPA is understaffed and under-resourced, resource being dollars, when compared to these competing jurisdictions. You can see on the graphs, on the left-hand side is the production, and on the right side is the budget. In the middle of the graph shows the number of board members. So Ontario, being similar in production to New Brunswick and slightly below New York, and on the budget side, Ontario is significantly less than Vermont, New Brunswick, and New York in terms of their budget. And I'll speak to the board members in a second. So all three competing jurisdictions have more than one full-time staff person compared to OMSPA's half a person. In addition, Vermont and New York both have highly experienced extension staff employed to allied research organizations, and New Brunswick is now developing a similar extension capacity. The comparison of the other jurisdictions showed that OMSPA's board is drastically larger than the boards of these other maple producer associations, with as many as 35 potential board members at the provincial level for OMSPA, compared to an average of 13 board members in the other jurisdictions. Even Quebec, with 30 times Ontario's production and 10 times the number of members, has only 13 board members. Large boards have less effective discussions, lower levels of board member accountability, are subject to groupthink where contrary opinions are drowned out, and poor levels of attendance due to more scheduling conflicts. So a large board actually works against in terms of the effectiveness of a board. Compounding this problem of a large board is that OMSPA's board representation is unbalanced across the locals. Each OMSPA local is allocated 2 spots on OMSPA's board of directors, but there are very large differences between different OMSPA locals. Some have many more members than others. For example, Waterloo Wellington local has 5 times as many members as the Ottawa Valley local, yet both locals are allocated 2 board seats. And similarly, some locals have many more taps than others. Simcoe and District local has 31,000 taps, compared to Algoma and District's local, which has approximately 357,000 taps. The result of these two are an unbalanced and unequal representation of members across the different regions of Ontario. Additionally, there is anecdotal evidence that there are a number of serious issues with some of the locals, including a lack of critical mass and volunteers, so that the locals are unable to provide full services to members. Some locals cannot fill their local board and executive positions. More than half do not have a constitution, and there is a lack of good governance practices in some cases. Income and expenses vary widely across locals. Many locals have a problematic amount of funds, could be either too low, which represents a local that is at financial risk, or too high, representing funds that are underutilized and not serving members. The working group also identified 2 areas of governance in which OMSPA and its directors were at risk and that need to be acted upon. The Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, which came into force in 2021, the province of Ontario considers agricultural organizations to be not-for-profits. The ONCA requires existing not-for-profit corporations to make any necessary changes to their incorporating and other documents to bring them into conformity with the ONCA before October 2024. The other item where there is risk is OMSPA's local associations may in legal terms be unincorporated associations, in which case liability falls to the directors and members personally. It is incumbent upon OMSPA to review the relationship of OMSPA and the 11 locals to establish in OMSPA's constitution and to look at strengthening governance across the whole organization and reduce risk for the members. John. So the strategic plan calls upon the governance pillar to provide strong leadership and advocacy for the maple syrup producers in Ontario as an intermediate outcome, and to optimize and rationalize OMSPA's structure for maximum impact and efficiency following organizational best practices and legislative requirements as an immediate outcome. The three focus areas under the governance pillar are then right-sizing the board of directors in line with organizational best practices and with consideration to equal representation. To look for ways to rationalize some of the responsibilities currently vested with locals so that member services are available uniformly. And to see to the evolution of committees to reflect increased scope of activities. All three of these activities will include member consultation, board approval, and member ratification. The timelines are laid out there. It's quite an aggressive timeline, but they are issues that need to be brought to the front, discussed, and solutions found for. John?
Yeah, thank you. Slide 11 speaks very specifically to government and industry relations. We've not formally had this position previously. The president annually can create committees after each election, and it has created a government and industry relations committee, which I'm currently chairing. I do come from a government relations background. And government policy background as well as a private entrepreneur that worked with many of the largest agribusiness companies in Canada and globally. I do realize the importance of keeping close relationships with government. It's both about being there when you can work together, being there to help support government on certain initiatives, and also at certain times when government wants to do something, make sure we find solutions to how to achieve it that actually are doable by our own members. And that's part of it related to regulations. And the other part of it is related to programs or and funding as well, making sure that they funding programs are created that will support our objectives and integrate with us. And we work closely together and trying to build this industry in Ontario together. So that's the objective of government relations. And the vast majority, actually pretty much all of the agricultural organizations, whether they're maple organizations in other parts of North America, at least the larger ones anyways, or agricultural organizations in Ontario and other provinces and other commodities, government relations is a key focus of those organizations. And it's how you can go from just doing what you can with your membership fees to being able to do much more by entering into closer relationships with government to be able to achieve the right impacts to help grow the sector. So what we'll see here is a number of things happening in 2023, a number of things happening in 2024. Much of the marching orders here are to make sure that as we want to move forward in initiatives, whether it's base funding for our organization, whether it is monies for a marketing and branding campaign, which we'll talk about tomorrow evening, or funding for the MART Center, which is the research and applied research and training center. Those we need. We can't get too far on just our own money. We would work together and basically point out things like, well, you've helped other organizations like the Beekeepers Association with their base funding. Also, you've helped marketing and branding campaigns for products and product promotion of other products. And the MART Center, which is both applied research and training and the extension piece, you used to do that. We will take that on, but we do need funding to secure and additional staff people, and so we're following in some senses very closely to the approach the Ontario Beekeepers Association took a number of years ago, but it's not an unfamiliar course of action because many of the farm organizations have taken this. New Brunswick pursued it in exactly the same fashion. So did New York, and so does Vermont, which is let's work together on doing economic development around the sector, i.e. increase the value of the Ontario maple product sector for the benefit of producers and for the benefit of the Ontario economy. How do we work together? And that is the role of government relations. Thanks. I think that was the last slide, is it? Yes. Just to give you an idea, the industry relations component is you find organizations that you can work with that can support you and you can support them, and mutually you can work together. Some of the initiatives we've started is working with the Ontario Woodlot Association. They have funding for woodlot resilience and climate change adaptation. And also the stuff that we've been working on, you maybe have heard about it, is some of the carbon neutral or carbon negative maple syrup, and doing the assessment of that. They're really keen on it from a living lab perspective, which is funding they've received, which we actually probably put they'll spend it on something we think is really important. We're also now members in Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and they've been working with us on a number of things related to governance and they're really keen on our climate change initiative on the carbon negative, carbon neutral maple syrup. And as well, we're working with the Ontario Beekeepers Association, and we'll be meeting with them on the, November the 17th down in Kingston. And so we can see whether there's some marketing initiatives that we can work on together, as two natural sugar producing organizations and producer organizations. So we've working with different groups. What it is that if you don't have a lot of people yourself, you get together with like-minded people to be able to accomplish more, and that's part of the industry relations stuff. So. Questions, I think John's asked.
Yes, or just something's just come in here now. How is entrenching government relations going to help our maple syrup producers? Will this not lead to more red tape down the road? Can we discuss how we would work to cut red tape?
Well, it depends what red tape is. Do you mean as individual producer? When we as OMSPA enter into a contract with the government, such as we did for this strategic plan, we had to put a proposal together. We then negotiated once they said yes, we then had a contract which has deliverables by certain dates and a bunch of reports. So when we get money from government as OMSPA, yes, John, you've had to do some red tape reporting, and you and I worked together on that and made sure that we did things on time, and they appreciated what we did and that we're on course. So yeah, there's red tape that way. What other red tape for individual producers? Well, as doing government relations is actually trying to make sure that the regulatory burdens, that the red tape is not any more than it has to be, and is less than maybe it might currently be, or what one would imagine it could be. So
that
yeah.
The example of the sugar labeling that we dodged is probably part of that, Randall?
Yes, fortunately that was handled at the international level, but there was an initiative to label maple syrup and other products, including honey, as sugar added products, i.e. a warning, there's lots of sugar here, be afraid of it type of thing. And we said, well, there's no sugar added, this is a product. And so that labeling was not imposed upon us, but that took a chunk of work to make sure that didn't happen.
And if I may, being involved in that file for the person asking the question, it involved money as well. OMSPA ponied up and contributed money into a lobbyist on both sides of the border, US and Canada, to lobby the respective governments that the added sugar label was misleading and convince them that it was. And so we succeeded in that, and that took effort. So was there red tape, and was there a process to do that, and a lot of back and forth? Absolutely, but that's how life is.
Our objective as an organization, like all trade associations, is to reduce that burden upon the members and handle it from a common base versus individually. That's what government relations is about when you look at it like an agricultural trade association, which we are.
Chris, did you want to add any more to that question?
Yeah, I just unmuted here. Yeah, so my concern is that this will eventually lead to more, red tape for the producers. For example, like when we get this government grants, like there's a lot of talk about getting government grants. And when we grab the money from the government, which initially comes from us in the first place, my concern is that if we pursue this, it's kind of like a monster that's going to continue to need to be fed. So then you're going to need more overhead as an organization, like what's already been stated. We want to add more full-time employees, and then that's going to, just create the need for more grants. You see what I'm driving at? And my concern is that that would kind of come at a burden to the local membership, and it becomes a heavy weight to bear. That's kind of what I'm driving at. Does that make sense?
You said to the local membership, meaning people who aren't serving on the OMSPA board. We realize that the more we do as an OMSPA board members, the more we're going to have to do. The only way we were surviving as an organization currently with the level of services being provided is we pay John for half-time and he's working full-time. And we have a number of other board members here are working the equivalent of staff positions to do the various work here already. So that is non-sustainable. And so we have to find the right balance of appropriate amounts of staff and as it relates to the deliverables that are of value to the members. We've been understaffed for a long time.
Well, I think that was kind of my point in stating that. Like, what if we looked at cutting that red tape out instead of adding more to John's plate, for example? That's kind of what I was referring to. If we, instead of pursuing the government funding and pushing that, looking at ways, because we're coming into a tough time as this kind of, we're going into this recession. And what I think we need to be looking at is how can we help the producers succeed rather than trying to put more burdens on their back. That's my point with that. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, I don't see that the individual producer will have more on their back. That's because the association makes sure that it doesn't fall on the back of the individual producer. That's why there's an association. You're not going to have more to do, Chris, because more happens at OMSPA centrally on a provincial level. You'll actually have more benefits with an expectation of less volunteerism.
Build on Randall. Build on Randall's point, Chris. It's Ray. The association is there to help the members work through some of that. And given where we are in society in a time frame, there's no way we're going to be able to think we can go back and be independent. And not that we need to live off government's hind you know what, but there's just reality and the success of other commodity groups of dealing with helpful programs. And yes, I know we pay for it, is proof that if we don't get in line, in queue of helping ourselves and working with government, we're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
And I don't know any other, it's how things work. And a lot of the foundational things that we've done the last 15 years in OMSPA was heavily, there was heavy assistance from OMAFRA, for example, and some federal money to help us determine our path. And the membership fees didn't change appreciably. And so it wasn't that the members paid for it, it was that we were able to access some funding to help us strategize the approach that we needed to take. So I'm with Randall and Bob that, and with the agenda that we hopefully will not have more bureaucracy for our members.
And part of the way to make sure there's no more bureaucracy than there is currently for members is a well-structured governance system that has been needing a bit of an overhaul for a while. And Bob is highly versed and experienced to do that type of thing. So that's a lot of volunteer professional time that we're not having to compensate somebody for. My time, my background is government relations and public policy and getting regulatory things through. Before I retired, I made a significant living off of that. So we're doing stuff now, but we're doing a lot of work on the back of volunteers. There's a lot of volunteers across the bay, and that's not going to continue. And it's not like, if you don't do something, we're not going to do it anymore. What it is that the volunteers is changing, is that people of different age demographics, the idea of belonging to the board, and volunteering is not what's happening these days. It's more like, well, you want me involved with a campaign that lasts for a few weeks? Well, I can do that, but sitting on a board and doing stuff and massive volunteering has changed. It's a generational thing, and it's become less so as the new generation comes along. So
okay, I'm just gonna hop in, Randall. George had something he wanted to say, and then we also have Maple Bluff had a comment too. So go ahead, George.
Yeah, hi. So for those who don't know me, excuse me, I make my living in large part helping various Canadian organizations, such as OMSPA, connect with sources of funding. And I just wanted to have a really brief comment about the government budgeting process. It is not the case that if OMSPA goes to OMAFRA and lobbies for money, that this will mean that OMAFRA will go to cabinet and ask for more money, right? OMAFRA has budgeted an amount of funds to invest into Ontario agricultural organizations to achieve the goals that it feels are important for the province. OMAFRA should get its piece of the pie, right? If we don't put our marker in the ground, its money simply goes to other agricultural organizations. If we think maple syrup is valuable and will contribute significantly in Ontario, it's to everyone's best interest, all of Ontario's, that we go for it. And I'd also like to comment that the amount of money we're talking about is extremely small in government circles. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Maple Bluff, you had something you wanted to say?
Hi, yeah, it's Trevor here. Hi. Just following some of the discussions probably spilling over from last night. Just looking at what, if it is for members and serving what members really need. My just concern is, does a bigger bureaucracy or administration really give us what we need? That was really where I was coming from. Resources, I think we have lots of internal knowledge. It's just a matter of tapping into the knowledge that we have as a group already. And I'm not sure that a top-down way of having that, aside from like cataloging who has what expertise and maybe vetting information that's already available publicly, like it's already there, maybe just rather than building a huge bureaucracy and administration that who knows where that's going to go.
I think Trevor, the point is who's going to do that work of that, organizing that and cataloging it. And anyway, that's just my quick comment.
It's Frank here. I finally made it, but I agree with you, John. That's the problem, is that we are not getting enough volunteer help. And as Randall had explained, a generational gap. The younger people are not stepping up to the board to take over a lot of these volunteer responsibilities. If you actually take into consideration the number of hours that the executives have of your board have put in the last year, and in a normal year, it's an amazing amount of hours. And we get $0 for that. So someone needs to do the work. And as the times are changing, as the society is changing, nobody wants to do the work for nothing anymore. Everybody wants to get paid to do something. So this is where we will have to go to find funding. Can we raise the membership fee? That was one of the questions I think Chris or someone had put forward last night, was raise the membership. You know, we should raise it all internally, our revenue. Well, the membership fees would have to be $1,000 a member to secure any type of funding. And so it's a way to go. We do have a plan B. Well, plan B is if we don't get the money secured through a MAPRA, then we will have to downsize our strategic plan and our goals, and it will probably affect the maple industry. So these are the things we have to take in consideration. You know, aim for a high mark, and hopefully you can get that. If not, then we have to lower our expectations. But the thing is, we need to protect our members, and we need to really protect our executives and our directors, and that is key right now in the government's in governance.
Bob Snyder had something he wanted to add here.
Sorry. I just want to comment, because there's sort of a tone here of why do we need government advocacy or government relations? And is this something the membership wants? Well, when we did the membership survey, the top 3 reasons why someone belongs to OMSPA is industry information, technical information, networking. And then the 4th reason is advocacy, keeping abreast of government issues affecting the industry and support OMSPA's unified producer voice with the government. So without a focus within the organization on government relations, we will be missing out on serving the 4th highest reason for belonging to OMSPA. So it's important. The membership is telling us through the survey that it is important. Thank you.
Can I add something to what Frank has said? It's not all to OMAFRA that we will be approaching. OMAFRA is one organization in the Ontario government. We'll be working with MNR on a number of other things in regard to access to trees. We'd also, there's funding at the federal level on different types of things related to climate change adaptation and things of this nature. So it's not just the provincial government, and it's not just OMAFRA. But just want to make sure the OMAFRA Pierrette, who's on the line, doesn't think she's the target for absolutely everything. Do not believe that for a moment. There's a lot of other programs that have been established by government for the agricultural sector, and we're just wanting to get some of the same type of treatment that other organizations do to get support for growing this industry. We've not done that too much before.
Okay, sorry. Jack McFadden also had a comment here. Shouldn't the M&P folks also be working with industry relations to secure dollars for the marketing branding campaign, outcome number 4? They have the expertise on what the money would be used for.
See, government relation is an underpinner to assist marketing and then the branding. It is the underpinner to assist applied research and training. Yes, when it's time to focus on things related to branding and marketing and branding, they will lead. but the interaction with the government on that and trying to find the appropriate funding to support what they want to do and they think is most appropriate, it's a joint venture at that point between the two groups.
Jack, did you want to add anything to that quickly, or is that good?
I didn't want to unmute. That's good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. It's not a unilateral effort by this one committee to short circuit the program defined by marketing. But I think what I just heard, Randall, is that it's going to be working together. The committee will come up with a plan in conjunction with industry relations. Industry relations will broker the deal with the governments, and together we'll work for a program that is both funded and implementable. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly it. And there's an expert. Like say, for example, the marketing branding want to do a certain type of thing, and they know what it is. But then you find a government program that is, you have to put a bunch of different information together. You have to put together in a certain fashion. So there's a skill set required to actually write proposals to the government. It's not just the plan that marketing wants to do. It's, you know, how does this meet a bunch of criterion and all this type of stuff. So that you help translate what the marketing branding people want into a proposal to the government, and do the relationship piece until which point you get something funded.
We've got a question from Steve Needham too. How did the beekeepers get to the level they're at? And we feel we're so far behind. Is there more attention as for things like the foul brood disease and whatnot? Anybody want to answer that, Bob or Randall?
So the question was, how are we not at the same level of OBA?
Well, how did the beekeepers make that jump? I guess, Steve, is that right?
Well, yeah, they had
part
that.
of it. They're the pollinators.
Yeah,
So that was their main platform. We don't have that.
yeah. But then
I have to challenge that. I'm thinking that I had bees. I'm thinking that, again, Ray, and I discussed this other times, foul brood is a disease that wipes out the bees in Ontario and Canada. So the beekeeper OBA wants to monitor where the hives are. And we keep hanging our hat on the beekeepers, what they're doing. But I'm thinking the government's going to put more focus on that, as opposed to somebody making a bad bottle of syrup with a little bit of mold. You know, I'm just wondering, like Ray, you and I, we all sat in this board for 10 years. Do we really let our members down in all this time for the OBA to be that much farther ahead? And all of a sudden now we're miracle workers. We're going to move that much farther ahead. We keep relating back to that. And I'm wondering, you know, where do we go wrong as to those guys to move up, or did they have better liaisons talking to the government, Randall, such as you're going to do?
Yeah,
I don't
well,
think
I just
it's not a
something in on-
competition. It's not a competition.
No, they actually want to work with this, and the person with inside the OMAFRA who actually worked with them quite closely has been on some of our working groups and will help us through that process. We won't use his name, but the chief economist. The thing is that they will say, the Ontario Beekeepers Association will say that their success is what they refer to as grantmanship, i.e. how to write for grants to do various things. They had probably a more detailed strategic plan earlier than we have had one. Okay, we had a general wish list of things, but you have to get very precise to be able to put grants together. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean we can't be somewhere soon. It just means that we've started a bit later. That's all.
There are other, like the berry growers, for instance, did a similar process and have really expanded there. So I don't think the OBA is the only example recently. So
yeah.
So I guess it's just being aggressive as we are now, right? Moving forward to make things happen.
Yep, exactly.
Exactly.
And where this is just a thought here, yes, it was the bees and their pollinators. And so it's like government responds to pain points, just like anybody else. Say, oh, there's an issue. Can you help us resolve it? And one of the issues I think we can contribute to significantly is the whole climate change, carbon reduction, etc. And we may say, as the government say in agriculture, you got to reduce the footprint. We say we can, we are, and etc. So we are a good news story, and that's always a good place to be. And if you don't think that agriculture is moving towards a more of a carbon responsibility, I've been sending around some stuff related to where the dairy farmers are heading and all the advertising they're doing on that. And it was actually appeared in the most recent e-newsletter. So our pollinator thing is going to be the carbon thing, and for us, and that's what we need to put forward is, we can help you with that, and you help us, we help you more.
I agree.
Randall, I'm going to jump in there too. We've got Jules, a question from Jules up next. It'll shift things a little bit, and then Chris Larimer will go to you. You've got your hand up. Jules has said in the comments or in the chat, while the growth of OMSPA is oriented on marketing, branding, resales, and growing the industry of maple syrup production, my concern is how we will assist our members who want to secure their operations from disasters. As many of you may know, Jules was hit very hard in the derecho storm. Excuse me, I do not see this here. Maybe it should be added to the list. Anybody want to comment on that?
That fits with government relations as well, because we need to work with Agricor and others to be able to get a more specific and well understood program for the maple industry.
So something that could be on our list. Yeah, Bob,
yeah.
sorry.
And it also, sorry, it also falls under member services, which we talked about last night. Whereas that type of assistance could be a service that comes from the member services pillar.
And I just want to add, John, it could be climate or it could be a human created. So for example, we don't measure glyphosates in our syrup. So that would be interesting to see an emergency fund to assist us if anything, an outbreak happens somewhere. Just a suggestion. I didn't see it here. I know we didn't talk about it because I've been hit hard on my head probably this summer. It's something that I don't see anywhere. How do we deal with this? So are there government funds that we could go to? I'll leave it like that. Don't want to be ranting too much here, but
in that case, it's because of spraying from nearby cornfields, and we need to identify the issue and find ways to work on it. But first, we need to identify it and do our homework as to the impact, and then move it forward as an issue to work on.
Okay, I'm going to go to Chris.
On that later comment, there's lots of studies with the OBA on glucosaphates, but I've been an OBA member for a long-standing years, and I know, just adding some comments to what I've read down the side, is that they've got a very, very strong standing relationship with the University of Guelph through teachers, profs, and students. And I know from being a member that they don't really service the commercial side of the beekeeping, that it's more so the backyard beekeepers that they're heavily affiliated with all the training courses and everything that they have. Hopefully that's part of our initiative and trying to get that relationship with the government, is to try to get people in at the University of Guelph to help forward progress to what you guys are doing, because that's obviously the big funding model that comes through the OBA and where they spend a lot of their money.
I think that's the MART, or the Maple Applied Research and Training, which is envisioned for with Algonquin, which we did discuss that somewhat fair amount last night, but yeah.
And the other thing related to the University of Guelph, it's not, they will emit, University of Guelph does, as does OMAFRA, as does the AREO, which is the Agricultural Research Institute of Ontario, which advises the minister where to get research for agriculture in Ontario. The University of Guelph has absolutely nothing to offer us from a maple perspective. They do in food processing, but not from the primary production. And so anyways, but we need our equivalent thereof, and that's why we propose MART, which is to draw from the best resources available and make sure we help our members in that regard.
Yeah, like bees are regulated by laws, then there's bee inspectors, and the whole food chain's developed through that direction, obviously. It's good what you guys are doing. I think obviously the everybody's just scared about future cost, and that's everybody's major concern that you can see. So
Yeah,
Thank you.
fair enough. Yeah. Okay, Dan, and I'm not sure if it's Dan or Tracy that made the comment, younger generation do not have time. They are working to pay for their homes and their operations, many with 2 to 3 jobs, which I think corresponds to some things that have already been said here. Dan or Tracy, did you want to speak to that at all, or can you find your mute button tonight, Dan?
Yes, I have help tonight.
There, okay.
Of course, reading through the comments and there's a lot back and forth and so on, but we've got to find some middle ground. And the thing, yes, the young people don't have time for more jurisdiction or paperwork or stuff like that. But this is where our organization has to step up for us, because we don't have time for this. And I really support the effort where we can actually have people or a board advocating or a desk advocating for us, because yeah, I'm not young anymore, but we're busy. And this is where it is very important to have actually somebody to stand for us. And I don't see this as a burden as far as paperwork, because to us as producers, it's actually to produce food. We actually have to have the legwork in place to set a board up to actually stand up and represent us. And I applaud you guys for trying to do this. This is where I stand. But I'm, of course, open to all comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. And Tracy.
Yes.
I figured out, I showed him how to use chat tonight.
Okay, yes, that's right. It was typed in the chat. Yes, perfect.
Thanks, Tracy, for assisting Dan.
There you go.
Yeah, we've got a comment from Xavier. The OBA isn't exclusively funded by the government. They have created other revenue streams as well. For example, their online training courses and OBA courses are nearly mandatory. Increasingly, bee suppliers in Ontario will sell bees only to people who've had some training from the OBA website. I guess that says the online courses and weekend courses are a nearly $400 entry charge before you ever make a drop of honey. I would hope we won't be going in this direction to fund a larger organization. Any comments there? Randall, Bob, Frank?
We know that the OBA has developed other revenue sources, and our thinking is as well, we need to develop other revenue sources other than just government funding. And so there's some things that we could possibly do. One of the things we've thought about is being able to offer carbon credit amalgamation initiative, where each individual farm may not have enough to be able to get compensated for, but if we were able to amalgamate them and for our members, and then do all the work for our members, and then reimburse them for the amount of carbon savings that they've created. And that would be another revenue stream for our members. For the effort of doing that amalgamation, we would think that there would be some monies that would come to ourselves as an organization to do that work. We've also learned from New Brunswick that actually the New Brunswick government handed over a program to the New Brunswick maple syrup producers to run that they would have normally run previously. That and so it's not run by the public servants anymore. It's run by the Maple Syrup Producers Association in New Brunswick, which is a silviculture program so there's other ways of generating money. It's not just government grants, it's sometimes services that are handed over to the Maple organization to run instead of the public service.
Thanks, Randall. We also have a comment from Brian Bartley. And Randall, I know you'll want to respond to this one. Can we partner with the OFA or other organizations to identify potential government funding? It seems to me there is money available if one can do some creative writing to fit a program.
Yes. That's why we joined the OFA. And we actually have assigned to us a board member, Jennifer Dolman, who's actually a crop advisor in the Renfrew area. And we also have a staff person who's our primary staff person. Her name is, oh my goodness, I know her by her former name, Sharman, Danielle Sharman, used to be, she got married this summer. Anyway, she's the economic development person there and our key person at OFA, and has been coordinating meetings with myself and with specialists with inside OFA. We've also connected to some of the governance training type stuff the OFA does for Bob. We're also working on some carbon related stuff, monetizing that for our members. So OFA is part of our team, and that's why we joined them. So it's a really good investment of $500, but also it's an investment of committee chair and committee members' time as well. So the answer is yes.
Brian, anything to add there? Or? Okay, I guess not. Sorry, Xavier, I didn't give you a chance to respond after we discussed the stuff about the beekeeping there. Do you want to add anything?
No, that's okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Chris Wagler has a comment to Frank's comment regarding involving the next generation. My concern is that we will continue on, if we continue on this trajectory, we will regulate our grandchildren and great grandchildren out of the maple industry.
Don't comment to that, John.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If I could predict the future, I would be writing the right 649 numbers down every Friday night.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors with that one. So I don't know that that's so much what we're talking about here, but it certainly is harder to pass farms on to younger folks.
That's not just in the maple industry, that's in every part of ag industry at this moment.
Yeah.
Well, actually, some of the work that happened in the working groups was, are there different business models that will help people enter into the maple syrup business? And we were looking at some of that, and being able to access some of the land on conservation authorities or in Crown land. What about a model like they have in Vermont, which there are sap producers as a way of getting into the business and selling their sap, and then they may want to evolve to be something more than a sap producer. But that's all the stuff that relates to what we can do as an organization centrally, is to do some of this thinking and investigating and relaying opportunities on to other people, and it's part of what we have to do, is think about the future. That's why it's called the strategic plan. This is the 5-year horizon that we're working on here. We also, when we were in the working groups, identified stuff way far out too, that like Chris was indicating, which is how do we have next generations come along and the one after that, and part of that is how we do our business and the scope and size and education and a whole bunch of factors that may need to be assembled to make sure the future is doable for our next generations.
We need to be able to make money.
Yeah,
so that we can pass it on, right? So
go ahead and build a house today and see what you have to go through. I don't see how we can, in this plan, so focusing back on the plan, that we can actually ever promise that we're going to not increase red tape or that we remain neutral. It's just society. The amount of issues that require reporting and documentation from your income tax to your,
Yeah.
you know, any type of change you want to make in your life is prominent. And I think we'd be naive to think that we can go back to the 1970s and say that it's an open gate and that we can do whatever the hell we want. I just don't think we can think that way. So we need to plan ahead.
We're not trying to create red tape. Red tape will come our direction. We're trying to make sure that no more than necessarily happens. And if there's some red tape comes towards us, it is in a fashion that makes sense to us and it's doable, that we can actually work with it versus having things imposed upon us that weren't thought about how it might apply at the sugar camp or in the individual businesses.
So, Randall, I can add a bit from this summer going through dealing with different government levels to see if there would be any disaster funding. One of the things that I found is that doesn't happen anymore. Yes, some of us got it last year, but there's a form of I call it disguised true funding where you can get money and get things. But to get there, we need to invest time and we need to look at what is being offered and not miss on the date. So for example, we benefited from the CAP program before, and that was excellent. It helped us develop a couple of festivals. The next one is SCAP. So Randall will have to look at this and analyze this and see what we can get from that. And that takes time. And he's just a volunteer. So, and John is full. So sometimes we need to look at that. So does that help, Randall? Because there's no free money anymore.
Well, no, see, what I've always found the best way to do it is to be on top of what's going on and to have relationships with people across various levels of government and they're thinking about something. They pick up the phone and ask you, what do you think about this? Is this workable? Is this doable? And then often if that's the type of relationship you establish, you can say, well, why don't we do a pilot project on that? And then we get funds to do a pilot project on something to see if an approach would work. And so that's also a way to generate revenue for the association. Okay, so it's like you don't go to government when you get a problem. You create a relationship that you go back and forth with each other, try to find solutions or identify things earlier than others have. By the time you read about something, it's already too late. You had to have been there before people even sat down to write it.
Yeah, and
can I step in? Sorry, can I step in? We're getting down into a lot of specifics, and we've got just over 10 minutes left. We'd like to wrap up by 9, and I'd like to see if we can move off the red tape thing and think a little more. Particularly, we haven't really discussed about governance and restructuring OMSPA. This is a huge issue. And there are also a few people here that have not commented, so I'm going to pick on them a little bit, like Marty Ennis, I see you're on, John Nyman. Have you guys got any comments about the structure of OMSPA and how we may change it to make it more effective going forward? Are you good with us looking at that? That's kind of really, that's the question for this whole exercise, right? It's not so much the exact details, it's the direction. And
yeah, I can speak up if you like. Certainly I've always gone with the approach, having taken over from my grandfather and my father. Just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean it's the right way to do it moving forward. So I'm certainly having a sober look in the mirror is always a good idea. And so I support looking at the looking at the governance structure, whether it's a much smaller proportional representation with a board that's much more broadly spread out, and then we're not leaning as heavily on the locals. I think that's definitely a rabbit hole that is very well worth investigating.
Great, thanks, appreciate that. Yeah.
But as well, Marty, you've actually worked in organizations that have needed restructuring from a volunteer perspective. I believe you did some with volleyball, didn't you? Or
Yeah, and still do. And that's we have a couple of different layers of structure in that we've got a volunteer executive. All we get out of it is a couple of steak dinners a year while we plan things out and work out details. But then do lean on our captains, so whether you would call them more sort of local reps or what you could call them, might be a good way to to disseminate that information down, that then your sort of provincial board members would maybe not not be the sole source of all the information, that would sort of filter out through call it a phone chain of hey, here's what's coming, here's what we might want to discuss, or through other public things like the webinars that we're doing within our locals.
Thanks, Marty. Appreciate that. Anyway, John Nyman, I see you're on. Do you want to add any comments?
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm here. Not a whole lot of comments at this moment. I mean, I guess a few things that have been talked about and discussed tonight, I can definitely relate to, being the younger producer, young family working off farm jobs, things like that. It's hard to participate in things. Things tonight is great. Meetings during the days, I've never participated at the board level, mainly because of that. Just having to take time off work, things like that. So there's a few things we could, I suppose, restructure to include some of those people, just more from an organizational point. Or as the overall structure, I mean, are there major savings or benefits? I mean, I think we definitely got to have better working relationships with all levels of government. Maybe not necessarily to create more red tape or whatnot, but just to get better programs, a little more timely manners for producers would certainly help. Other than that, I'm just kind of listening in, taking it in here.
Well, thanks for taking the effort to get on tonight. And
I love Martin's Marty Ennis's comment that being almost 50 is youngest. He was very flattered by that. So
There's
Marty,
a lot more gray there than red now, Frank.
and you have to, and again, we go back to, and please don't take this wrong when we talk about younger generation not getting in. I understand that the society today and what we do for our children and our families is totally different than when I was growing up. And most of us here are baby boomers. And it was a totally different society. It was a totally different networking thing. There was no social media. If you wanted to know anything, you had to attend the meetings. And belonging to the Ontario Electrical League, belonging to running as a president with them also was, we would have 70, 80 members at a meeting. And at the end, we're down to 15 or 20 because society has changed that much. So it's not just this organization, it's every organization in Ontario who are suffering the same as we do as the baby boomers retire or are burnt out, stuff like that. And the younger society just does not have the time, whether, like Dan says, 2 or 3 jobs, as Ray says, building a home, and everything else that goes with that. So there's nothing right and there's nothing wrong here what we're talking about. It's a plan, and the difference between this strat plan and the strat plan we had before is that we've actually put in timelines. Are they aggressive timelines? Yes, they are, but some of them may get bogged down, so we may need the full 5 years to implement it. But at least it's a timeline. It's something that we set. It's a goal. You wouldn't set things in your life without goals. You wouldn't be at your job without goals. We all have to set goals. And I think that's the whole idea here, that all the chairs, all the working groups and the executive have done a fantastic job in setting goals. And we are here to protect the members. Will there be red tape? Maybe. We're there to make sure there's no more red tape. Are we going to be busy at the head office? Yes, we are, so we need help to do that. So we need to get funding, but we are there to make sure that that this red tape does not filter down to the producers. I'm one for that. I have enough red tape at my office at work, to what I did 35 years ago in my office to what I do now. It takes 2 more people just to cover the paperwork. So I understand everybody's concern. And as we wrap up this meeting tonight, we're not much different in this 2018 to 2023 strat plan. We have just done things differently. We have brought them more to the focus. We have set timelines, and we will work as a group to get this done. And if you can volunteer, even if it's an hour or 2 a month, that's an hour or 2 more of extra help that we can have. So I want to thank everybody for tonight, and hopefully we'll see most of you tomorrow night.
Thanks for all the comments, everyone. I know we didn't get to everything in the chat, but like I said, I am saving that so we have that recorded and captured. So we know that those are comments of yours or concerns. And with that, thanks everyone. Appreciate all the great discussion. Really good evening, and hope to see you tomorrow night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
you.
Night.
Good night.
John, John, can you stay on a minute?
Yeah.
Oh, you're still there.
You want me to stay as well?
Yeah, if you don't mind.